pouring everything into our faith and spirituality is the high that most people are looking for in life, right? And it's the most pure thing you could ever imagine.
All right, I'm here with the man, Trey Morrison. Coach Trey, how you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, man. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. We've known each other for quite some time now, and we've been talking about recording this because I think your story is so powerful. It needs to be heard by more men. You have an amazing testimony of what the Lord's done in your life, and I can't wait to tell it today. So I'm honored to have you on.
Excited, man. I know we have been talking about this for a while, so I'm grateful to be here, man, and hopefully we can help change some hearts and minds today.
So Trey, let's introduce the audience to you and how we got connected. So you might be wondering, why is Trey on the podcast today? So Trey, we've been connected for a while now. I don't even know. It feels like at least a year. It's probably not quite a year yet, but tell me that story, how we got connected. And then I want to get into your backstory and what the Lord's done in your life.
So first off, I know a lot of people talk about social media. I love social media because if we didn't have it, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. But I heard you on a podcast, the Men in the Arena podcast, I believe. And I was like, man, who is this guy? They were talking about your book, The Standard. Bought your book, read the book literally in like one sitting. And it was like all these concepts that I saw missing in the Christian community, but I didn't see anybody speaking about it. So like that book, it changed my life. I was like, holy cow, there's more people out there that feel this way. So I looked you up on Instagram, shot you a DM, man. And we were on a phone call that day. And I was literally like, your book changed my life. Will you mentor me? How can I get closer to you? And that's kind of how it all started.
Wow, it's amazing. Yeah, you've been a member of the Standard 59 Mastermind since then. And I want to tell you, like, social media is amazing. I agree. It can be totally a time suck and it can distract you. And I like to say this, you're either using it or it's using you. And at the time we're recording right now, I just spent the last weekend at a men's conference and I walked around the campgrounds there and I saw 80 men holding copies of the Standard, Trey. Like they were on the tables. I saw them on a bench outside. I saw guys walking, all different ages, like walking with this book. And I'm like, wow, if I never was obedient to write that, that would have never happened. But the reason I got invited to that conference is also through social media. I met someone and we started talking and then one thing led to another. I wouldn't be talking to you today if it wasn't for that. So we can definitely use these platforms and choose not to be used by them. So amazing. Well, I don't want to hold back what you have to share because you've experienced God's power in your life. You have an insane story with what you're doing now, but your backstory is even more powerful when you see where you came from to what you're doing now. So I'm going to let you take it. Do you want to share first what you're up to right now, or would you prefer to start? Because the audience already knows that you are an accomplished athlete. So why don't we just tell them what you've been doing and what you spent the last weekend doing, and then we'll get into your backstory from there.
So yeah, I somehow found myself in running 100-mile ultramarathon races this past weekend. I was out helping one of my buddies who was one of the original Run with Christ members. I paced him for his 100-mile race. So that's what I was doing this weekend. And as we go through my testimony, we'll kind of lead up and explain a little bit more about that. But Josh, I'd like to ask, like, how far do you want me to take this thing back as far as what God's done in my life?
You go where you need to go, because I want to tell the story. And I think the men that listen to us, they need to be inspired, encouraged, and see what God's done. So we need to give God the glory for where he's taken you from to what you currently explain, that you're running 100-mile races. I want to break down what is Run with Christ. And so you tell the story.
We'll take it back to how I was raised and my relationship with God as a young kid. I was raised in church. I was raised in a home that didn't necessarily embody Christian principles. Like, we went to church because that was kind of the thing to do. And to be honest, there's two things. Another reason why your book really spoke to me. I had some negative experiences at church. One of those was, I don't know if anybody is familiar with cards, like Pokemon cards. I remember me and my brother were playing with these cards, and the preacher had actually said that was like a demonic game. As a really young boy, I'm just like a kid playing with cards. It was really odd to me, and it really rubbed me the wrong way as a young kid. And I just kind of brushed it off. And there was another thing as a young kid in church, and this is no disrespect to anybody, I looked up to elite athletes. I wanted to be a professional baseball player, right? Every young kid does. The men in my church growing up, there was really nobody that I could look up to. This is no disrespect to any of them, but as a young kid who looks up to professional athletes, and then you look around at this church with, for lack of a better term, men who are not taking initiative for their life, men that did not inspire me when I was around them and those kind of things. So I share that with you because those two experiences in church really led me down this path that I walked down really for the rest of my life. Because after those experiences, I really just fell into this thing of Christians are just weak people. Like that was my mindset, which led me to become atheist for most of my life. Like I would walk around and I would say that, Christians are just scared because of these influences that I had in my life and some of these experiences as a young age. And my brother, we were on the same path with that stuff. And I was saved and baptized as a young kid, went through that experience. And then I was like, you know what? I don't believe in any of this. This is silly. This doesn't make sense. These men that I'm around in church don't look like they embody anything. And it was like nobody stood for anything. And that led me down the road through high school, playing sports. I had the big dream of playing college baseball, and I put everything into sports and athletics. And you could say my identity was wrapped up in it 100%. Like that was what I identified as. And I had a high school ending sport injury in football. So I had actually fractured a bone in my spine my sophomore year in football, which put me out of sports till junior year. And I was warming up for tryouts junior year of baseball. And my coach is like, I need a release note from the doctor. And I remember calling the doctor right then. And I was like, hey, I need a release note to play baseball. And he just said, no. He's like, no, you're not, like, you can't play sports anymore. And I just remember in that moment, I took that at face value, Josh. Like looking back, like I didn't question it. I just had this overwhelming sense of rage and anger and heartbreak come over me. And I was just like, well, that's it. Like, that's it. And I went and told my coach this, took it out on him like it was his fault, sped off home crying in tears, just my first heartbreak, because sports was where I went to find myself. That was really the only place I ever felt confident in my life, man. Like I was very self-conscious as a kid, but sports was the place where I did feel confident, where nothing around me ever mattered. And I went home that day and I just told my parents, I was like, I'm quitting school. Like I'm dropping out. I'm a high school dropout. I did not make it through my junior year of high school. And they didn't really know how to handle the situation. I mean, here I am, a raging, 17-year-old kid screaming and cussing and just like losing my mind. So I ended up quitting school. And before that, I had started, getting into drugs a little bit. I was, a young kid, freshman, sophomore, hanging out with the varsity sports players. And I remember them, they would always offer, to smoke weed with them. And I'd be like, no, I'm an athlete. Like, I don't do that. If you hang around the wrong people long enough, at some point you will get influenced by that. When baseball was ripped away from me, I found myself looking for that same feeling of freedom that I found in sports through drugs. So here I am, 17 years old. I've dropped out of high school. I lost my first love, which was baseball. And I was around a crowd that I should not have been hanging around. And the weed turned into everything else, especially when I turned 18 and I got my first job, because then I actually had money to buy more drugs. And I just want to be very open about this story because I know there's a lot of people who struggle with this that may be afraid to speak about this. But, that led to cocaine. I mean, Adderall, Molly, ecstasy, just the whole 9 yards, anything that I could find, alcohol, just to find this freedom in my life to escape life and reality, really. And, throughout this whole time, I'm atheist. Like I said, I don't have any faith in God, and I'm just finding freedom, in quotation marks, freedom through drugs and alcohol. I got my first job and I worked up the ladder. My dad got me a job at a CNC machine shop. I worked from a very low paying grade job all the way up to a manager position. And, all while I was doing this, man, I was doing drugs. Like everybody saw me as this progressive person. Like, man, Trey's doing good. He dropped out of high school. He worked his way up in his career. But behind closed doors, I'm snorting cocaine, getting through my work day, find myself at night at the drug dealer's house all night, But, I was at work the next day. I worked hard. I did my job. And it created this real, just deep inner turmoil in my life because people saw me one way, but behind closed doors, I knew what I was actually doing. And, that's a really tough place to be, to the point, Josh, that I used to look at homeless people on the side of the road and envy them during this point in my life because I'm like, man, at least they're who they say they are. Like, people ride by, they're like, look at that bum. He's probably like smoking crack, And I'm like, dude, what does it feel like to be your authentic self? What does it feel like to actually be you, So I had this push and pull throughout this time of my life of like, I was this progressive person and I knew I was capable of making progress and striving for more. But on the other side of just this demon in me that like wants to seek freedom through drugs, wants to seek or escape through drugs, and they just couldn't handle the pain and reality of life. My brother and I bonded with that, Josh. Like, we did drugs together. That was like what we did. We used to walk around and we would say, man, like, how do people get through life sober? Once again, we envied these people. Like, really, we would be like, how do you even do that? Like, it was impossible. And throughout this period of my life with my brother, we were best friends growing up my entire life. We were both atheists, both hateful to Christians coming up, both bonded doing drugs together. And there came this point in my life, Josh, where I started working out, and that started to fill this gap that I really needed in my life. It started to make me feel like an athlete again. And me and my brother kind of went separate ways. And it was really difficult, man. Like, because we were best friends our entire life. And here we were, we bonded over this thing. And he's going down this path deeper and deeper and deeper into the drug world. And I'm trying to get out. Like, I'm like, man, there's something else for me. I know that there's more in my life. I know there's more things that I can do. And it created a lot of hate from him towards me, thinking that I'm better than him and all these things. Well, I share that with everybody because a little over 3 years ago, my brother was murdered, and our relationship was really rocky. And it was rocky because we went from a point of being best friends and then being best friends and bonding through using drugs. And then me, quote unquote, trying to be, better than him in his words per se. Our last conversation, Josh, me and my brother, I can't even repeat the things we said to each other, but there was a fist fight. There was firefighters there. We were saying just very hurtful things to each other, because we knew how to trigger each other. I didn't see him for probably a year and a half. And then I got that phone call that he was murdered. And I can't even put into words the amount of pain that put me through. I remember being in a feeble position in my bathroom. I felt like somebody took my soul and ripped it out of my body. I mean, it was the most painful thing I ever been through in my life. And I share all that with everybody because that was the launching pad that changed my life. That is why I'm sitting in front of you right now. That's why I have a cross around my neck, and why I have a gym where we lead Bible studies, and how Jesus really radically stepped in and changed my life. Because when I lost him, I lost my soul. I lost who I was. And just to be honest with you and everybody, I had two options, Josh. So when I lost him, man, I own a gym in town, have a lot of people that count on me, train a lot of clients. We have this beautiful gym that's a pillar in our community. And I remember people coming to my house because I checked out of the gym, man. I was like, I'm done with this. I don't care what happens. Like, I couldn't even bathe or shower. I was so depressed. And I just remember another inner turmoil that I was battling, man, because here all these people are coming by to see me, and I didn't want to see any of them because I was so dark in this moment. But all these people truly cared about me, and I explained true depression and trauma to people like this just from my own experience. It's like, I didn't want to see anybody, but yet I wanted to hug everybody. But I didn't want either one of them. I was just sitting in the middle, terrified. And so I started beating myself up about that. Man, Trey, you got all these people that care about you. You don't even care about them, Fast forward to, I had a therapist. So I started seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist during this time of my life, Josh. And I'll never forget, man, this therapist, his name was Aaron. Big burly guy, hop on a Zoom, a video call, kind of like this. And he knew my faith and everything. I told him I was atheist. I told him my backstory when I had to fill out to apply for therapy. And this is all he said to me, man. And this radically changed my life in this moment. He said, brother, I can't do anything for you. He said, but I know somebody who can. He said, Jesus Christ saved my life. And as soon as he said that, Josh, in that moment, dude, in the back of my head, I'm like, here we go again with another Jesus talk. Like, get out of here. You know, it's in the back of my head as he's talking. And he continues on. He says, I lived a double life for 27 years. I've overdosed 7 times and been Narcan back to life. He said, I ran a successful business and behind closed doors, I was smoking crystal meth. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, you know, talking about the double life thing. And he said that. And I was like, man, if Jesus saved you, surely he can do something for me, because I haven't went that deep, you know? And there was this spirit that went off in me, this light bulb, and he shared his testimony with me. And all he said was, brother, I ask you to do a couple things for me. He said, get a Bible, start listening to K-Love Radio, and find a church to go to. And I was like, you know, I was at the point, Josh, where it was either that or I was killing myself. This was about 3 years ago, was when all this went down. And I left out, you know, the therapy. Like, I actually went to take my own life. I drove to this pond in Salisbury, North Carolina, and my plan was to drown myself. I didn't tell anybody. And I had a book with me. Mere Christianity was the book my friend gave me. And I'm just like struggling. I'm just like, man, I haven't really believed in God. I've had all these negative relationships and impacts in my life. And I was just flipping through this book. And as I was sitting there, Josh, pondering on whether I was going to take my own life that day or not, I had flashcards that they were rapid through my brain of all these kids that I've impacted, all these people that I coach, all these people I'm going to leave behind. I mean, it was the most vivid, transformative experience in my entire life. And long story short, obviously I left the pond that day and got in my car and drove home. And that's really when I went all in on my faith. You know, I want to be very open with this too about Aaron told me that story. That was the therapist's name. And in that moment, I had a spark in my spirit. But I worked my butt off, man, to grow and cultivate this. And what I mean when I say that, there was multiple days, Josh, where I was laid in my office, my home office, and I was crying my eyes out, just in so much like emotional and spiritual pain, and saying out loud with worship music on the radio, this is silly, this is not going to work. As I'm like praying and just worship music blasting. And I'm like, I'm trying to like push this away because my disbelief was so strong. I'm like, this is such a joke, you know? And I just want to be open with that, because I think a lot of times I hear testimonies from people or I share mine and somebody's like, oh, so like in that moment, everything was good. It's like, no, in that moment, there was a spark, right? There was a spark. And then it was like, it was up to me to lean into God. It was up to me to take action and let God change my life, right? And that's exactly what God did.
And you partnered with it. You responded to what the Lord started in you when you explained that spark. But you had a response. He didn't do all the work for you when it comes to turning your life around.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, is partnering with him. And, you know, Josh, we've had a lot of conversations. I'm big in the personal development space and like, you know, work, like get after it and those things. But I don't ever want that to be missed, because I think sometimes if not, man, people might hear somebody's testimony and they might have that spark and they might think, oh, then life just changes for the better for all the way around. And it's like, no, there's still action, right? Faith without works is dead. It's like, you have to partner with him, like you said, and allow him to change your life.
And there's going to be some things that you stop doing. And that's the process of transformation, right, Trey? So you got the spark, you got new life, but now you have to walk it out. And then you're applying diligence, discipline, you're building new habits, new patterns. And that process has room because it has somewhere to go and it has boundaries to support it. And that's really led to the next phase of your journey with what you built right now. But before we get into that, I want to call out a couple things I saw that I heard you say. So like even going back to the beginning of the story, just the whole concept of identity, when you were explaining, you had an identity shift when you were an athlete. You started viewing yourself as an athlete, and everything that you did in your life was viewed through the lens of an athlete, because I heard you say, no, I don't do drugs. I am an athlete. So break that down for me a little bit more, and then let me let you take it from there.
I love that. I'm so glad you brought that back up. So my oldest brother, we somehow were around a very powerful drug world, Josh. Like some very powerful dealers that I was around as a young kid. And the person that initially said that to me, I'll never forget. There was a big party at my house. My dad worked night shift, so he was gone. This pretty massive dealer, local, he said, he's offering me some drugs. And that's my response. I said, I'm an athlete. I don't do drugs. And his exact response, Josh, in that moment, he said, I sell drugs to all the athletes. So here I am, 14-year-old kid, and I'm like, no way. But that put a seed in my head. I mean, in that moment, I was like, wait a second. So these guys at my local school that I'm looking up to, is that true? I didn't ask him, I didn't dig any deeper, but I would be lying if that did not open something up in my brain. And I did later find out that there was a lot of truth behind that. But the power of identity, like you said, in that moment is like, I was so identified with where I was going with my life. I knew that was not going to get me there in that moment. I knew that I was strong enough to not fall victim to that at that time.
Hey guys, my brand new book, Kingdom Driven, the definitive guide for how driven Christian men just like you can dominate in life, is out on Amazon right now. But because you're here, I want to gift you this book absolutely for free. All you have to do is go to kingdomdrivenbook.com, grab a copy right now. I'll give you an e-version immediately sent to your email so you can get equipped with the frameworks we teach so you can take dominion in life. That's kingdomdrivenbook.com. Now, back to the show. And I just got to pull out when you said seed, I was saying seed in my head. I'm like, there's the seed. And it's an eternal principle. It's a kingdom principle. So let's just go there for a second, because we know 100% that the Lord was planting seeds in your life through other people and through Aaron, and probably even before that at a young age where you had these seeds. But we also see a counterfeit version. And we even see in scripture that there's a parable where the enemy goes into a field and plants seeds to ruin a harvest. And I'm thinking like, wow, just like the Lord plants seeds in our life, the enemy also plants seeds. And he wants to see a counterfeit harvest, something that brought you into what eventually happened to you, but then it got turned around. Just a powerful truth right there. The other thing I heard you say was when you finally took that step and you went into the world of drugs, you talked about you were among a new circle of friends. And I was thinking like, wow, first we have identity, but then the next thing I saw was you made a decision. Let's say you partnered with the wrong thing, and then you placed yourself, or you were placed into a new environment. So how important was that environment to keeping that stranglehold of, this behavior going in that direction?
Yeah, it was everything. And I'm glad that you brought that back up, because Josh, this like turmoil in this double life I've battled for a long time. So my brother, he hung out, he was the outcast, right? And he was my best friend, but he hung out with the crowd, with, the druggies, the rockers and those things. Me, I hung out with the jocks and those guys. So like, once again, in school, during the day at school, I was hanging out with the popular kids, the athletes and things like that. But guess where I was at nighttime, right? I was hanging out with the other crowd. And once again, people used to see my brother as the bad kid and see me as the good kid. And then here I am this whole time doing essentially the same things he was doing for a very long time. And going back to the environment question, that's everything. I mean, it is 100% everything. Like that stronghold, your environment is so massive in whatever you want to do or achieve in life. And that's, as this story unfolds, it's like, that was why my brother, we had to separate, because that environment, I had to get that away from me. I did not have enough self-control to not do that and be around him. In this moment right now, Josh, I could be around any of that stuff and not partake in it. However, when you get to that point, you don't even think about putting yourself in those situations anymore,
I need to know this before we move on to the second chapter of your story here. When you separated from your brother, it sounds like at that point you kicked drugs. Like, how did you do it? Was it gradual? Was it a process? Did you just stop cold one day and said, hey, this life is not for me anymore? Tell me what happened there.
It was gradual. And I explain it to people like this. If anybody's ever, been up for nights doing any type of drugs or anything like that, I remember telling my brother, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And he's like, what do you mean? People who have addictions and people who use drugs, they're the strongest people on the planet. And I want to explain why. So, I maintained a great career, worked my way up the ladder. But if you're up for nights on drugs, entering back into the real world, like when you get sober for a day, is the most torturous experience on planet Earth. All your dopamine is gone, right? I didn't know that at the time, but you've just burned out all your dopamine, 10x'd it for nights or days or whatever it is. And then now you got to face the world. And when you talk about painful, you talk about hard, which is why addicts, they just keep doing more and more and more. And that's how they find themselves there, because that life of trying to do that plus maintain a career or work up the ladder is like, you get to a point where it ain't fun anymore, man. It's not fun anymore, right? And I mean, it's not fun as in it's torture. Like, why do I keep doing this to myself? So it was this gradual moment, and that was like the seed for that change. And then it was like, that's exactly what it came back to. It was like, this just isn't fun anymore, man. Like I would rather try to learn how to cope with life than try to enter back life after doing these drugs for days and nights. And, and after that, there was still, I was still smoking marijuana a little bit, but as far as like the hardcore stuff, that was like a really pivotal moment in my life to stop all that.
Okay. So thanks for clarifying that for me. So take me to the next chapter. You accept the Lord, or you get this spark, you're starting to partner with God, and Aaron was instrumental. Sounds like friends gave you a book that really played a part. The Lord was there at a pivotal time. I see his hand on you your entire life, but he's guiding you, he's protecting you, he's keeping you. And so what happens next?
So next, there was some really powerful things. So like as I'm working through this and growing my faith, I'll never forget, I sought out a local pastor, Josh, and I just reached out to him. I was like, hey, can I come talk? Because I had like this identity crisis. I like crazy. I always cuss. Like it was just part of me. The music I listened to, our gym, my last facility that we were in, a ton of worldly music and things like that. And I found myself not wanting to hear any of that anymore. I have not said a cuss word since that day. And I know people struggle with that, but I don't speak like that anymore. It was just instantaneous change. I sought out a local pastor who I've trained a lot of his family. And I went and sat down on his couch, and I'm like, I'm losing my mind, man. The world looks different. I'm speaking different. I don't want to listen to some things. And he's just sitting there smiling, kind of like you are right now. And I'm like going through all this. He's like, yeah, man, the Spirit completely changed your heart and flipped it upside down. It was kind of terrifying, man, to a point, because it feels like a high. Like it really does. And I was like, man, this feels a lot similar to these things I was chasing in my life. And that's a big message that I talk about today. And it is so powerful, but like taking care of our body, our fitness and health, pouring everything into our faith and spirituality is the high that most people are looking for in life. Right. And it's the most pure thing you could ever imagine. And after that meeting with him that day, I was just like, all right, we'll keep leaning in. So it wasn't long after that, I made a video on my Instagram. And keep in mind the guy that I explained before all this. It might have been on my gym's Instagram. I was like, hey, we're moving to a new location. We're changing all our core values. And the number one thing is faith. Like our core values are faith, family, fitness. Like we have it on our walls in here. Like if you walk into our facility, we have a cross and a prayer board up right when you walk in. Jesus really put this on my heart. Like God really put this on my heart that this new facility is going to be his facility. It's not my facility anymore. The strength compound is not Trey's anymore. And sure enough, I'm sitting in that facility right now, Josh. You walk through the doors, the first thing you see is faith. There's crosses on the walls, a ton of Christian music we play. And I lead a Bible study every Wednesday night here that we go through. And that was like the biggest change from a business standpoint. But there was more from a physical standpoint too, Josh. I remember running a marathon. It was like my second marathon. And I've always fueled my life off self-hate, man. Everything in my life. And I attribute a lot of my success to that. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. And I was running this marathon and I was towards the end of it and I was like trying to beat myself up. And it was like I couldn't get the words out of my head and it was really weird because I was like wanting to run faster. And that day I finished this marathon and I was like empty inside. I was like, wow, like doesn't normally feel like it normally does. Like, why am I even doing this? To the point I was like, man, maybe this like fitness thing isn't what I thought it was, Then as I prayed about this and I journaled about this, it was like, God's like, no, we're not doing this for you anymore, Trey. Like, this whole thing isn't for you anymore. And that's really where the Run with Christ mission was born. And the purpose behind that is to glorify what Jesus Christ has done in my life. Taking somebody who was atheist for a long time, taking somebody, Josh, who did not bathe for 2 weeks. When I lost my brother, everybody around me is terrified. I mean, that's how low and dark I was. Like, I literally didn't care about living or breathing. And to do that, I'm like, man, what's like the biggest difference from that, you know? And then you find ultra marathons. I found a 100-mile race, and I was like, man, that would be really cool to use that as a mission to testify like how powerful Christ is, to take somebody from that point of darkness and despair and now run a 100-mile race. I don't know if there's anything any more opposite than that, you know, and that's really what I was going for, like not leaving your house, not bathing, to like, I'm going to not only run a 100-mile race, but train for a 100-mile race, you know, which is a ton of work and effort. And that's really like, from the physical fitness standpoint, that's what that's leaned into, and why, you know, I was out this weekend helping my buddy, and we're actually gearing up for our third 100-mile race. So since last December, about to do my third 100-mile race in this Run with Christ mission that we're embarking on.
Yeah, amazing. And, you know, for those people that are just listening to the podcast, I got to say, like, Trey, you're an inspiration, because you're also not your typical, I don't think you're the typical ultra marathon runner where, you know, you've kind of lost all your muscle mass and you're just like a lean, thin guy. Like, Trey's jacked. He runs a gym. You're bringing people personal transformations, and you've done it while maintaining your muscle mass at the same time. So you don't look, at least to me, when I think about someone running marathons, you know, there's a marathon runner's body that's all they train, but you balance it really well with your weight training as well.
Yeah, I definitely do not look like the typical runner by any stretch.
Which is great. And it's an inspiration. Like, anyone could do this, and you don't have to like totally change what your current regimen is.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, knowing exactly what to do. And what's, you know, that's really cool too, like bringing that up is, you know, whether it's coaching people online, whether it's the gym here, is like, now like a big part of my mission too is helping people understand that like, dude, you're supposed to take care of your body. Like, this was like our first responsibility. Like, these bodies that we were gifted, you know, and it's not about running 100-mile races. It's not about being shredded with the six pack, but it is about doing some physical activity. It's about controlling what you put in your mouth and doing your best to be like, okay, God put a lot of great things for us here to eat and nourish ourselves with. And how can we actually utilize that to not only build our body, but to grow our spirit, you know, because I've never met anybody, Josh, that I've worked with. And part of my program is like the habits that I build for people. I start people out, you got to read the verse of the day on the Bible app, right? And that's part of their fitness program. And we build into reading more scripture. But I share that with you because I've never met or coached anybody, Josh, in my life that as they got more fit and as they paired that, they habit stacked that with their spiritual walk, that their spirits didn't just light on fire, you know, that they just weren't like just on fire for God and filling him more in their life. And I think that combination is such a beautiful thing to help men and women, but specifically men, to leverage these things to help turn them into a godly man that can help inspire others. And maybe even, you know, that young Trey that needed an inspiration as a kid.
Hey guys, exciting news. We now have gear available for you to purchase if you want to show the world that you're living to a different standard and that you are kingdom driven. Right now, you can go to standard59gear.com, or you can just go to our home website, which is standard59.com. Go to the gear page and you can check out our latest designs. We got hoodies, we got t-shirts, we got mugs, different accessories, and we're going to be dropping new items regularly. So let us know what you want. Go there, get some gear, and thank you for your support. Hey guys, excited to let you know that we now have gear. If you go to standard59gear.com, you can check out our latest hoodies, t-shirts, accessories. We got mugs, we got decals, we got more things that we're adding to the store on a regular basis. So you can go to standard59gear.com or the standard59.com website and check out what's going on over there so you can get some gear, raise the standard, and show the world that you are kingdom driven. Amazing. Because you started so strong as an athlete, and now you're replacing and you're giving that identity as an athlete as well to men, and you're coupling it with this force multiplication of like your spiritual life and the way you conduct yourself physically. And, you know, we share those same values where we live in a culture where everything's about our comfort, right? How can we become more efficient and even make things more comfortable? over and over again. And I love the concept. You obviously know that I talk about this a lot too. It's like we have all these metaphors for men in scripture. And I just find an identity with the athlete, that Paul sees himself running a race. He sees himself boxing. He sees himself wrestling, and he's pushing, he's striving. And for me, when I'm working out, Trey, and I believe it's the same for you, I want to hear your take on it. I'm correlating. It's a spiritual experience, because we're not just going through the motions. It's like, this is a lifestyle. This is what we chose to do. This is what we're doing, and we're going to do it with all of our heart. And you and I both live by the same thought that the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. The way I'm showing up in the gym is the way I'm showing up at home, is the way I'm showing up in my spiritual life. The way I'm showing up in my spiritual life is also going to translate to the way I'm showing up in other places.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is about not only leaning into it, but taking it seriously. And I have this saying that really was born through this whole process, and it can be applied at any time, because nutrition is one of the hardest things to control. I have a massive inner fat, so I want to be very open with people. And I think nutrition is very hard for people to control on two fronts. Now, we talked about drugs a little bit earlier, Josh. Look, if you have a cocaine addiction or whatever your addiction is with drugs, like, you can stop those things and live, right? But people who struggle with food and they have food addictions, it's like, oh, you got to have a little dose of that a couple times a day and still control yourself, which makes it really difficult for a lot of people who struggle with that. Now, I share all that to say that there's this concept, anybody who's ever overeaten and just felt like a turd after, right? Anytime I'm faced with a decision, if I'm living fully in the spirit and I ask myself, is this nutrition going to feed my spirit or stab my spirit? Because there's nobody that has ever overeaten on a bunch of food and been a glutton felt like your spirit has just been stabbed. Like, your spirit is not on fire for nothing at that point. Like, you're laid up on the couch like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible. It's like, but I think having that mindset and that frame, especially for Christians, if we can start viewing our nutrition and our fitness in that frame, and we really lean into our faith in God and understand that, like, man, what I'm putting in my body, whether it's my nutrition, whether it's my mind, is doing one of two things. You're either feeding your spirit or you're knocking your spirit off track. And there's really no in between on those things. So I just ask everybody, when you're making nutritional decisions, like, ask yourself, is this going to feed my spirit, or is this going to derail my spirit? Is this going to make me feel lower in life? And start looking at your nutritional practices in that way. And then you can carry that into every other area of your life as well.
I agree. Paul the Apostle says to present your bodies a living sacrifice. And we've reduced everything just to the realm of the spiritual. And it kind of goes back to the whole reason, like, how you and I got connected around the message of the standard, and even your story growing up and not seeing strong men, not seeing role models. And now you're becoming that, and you're becoming that for the younger generation, for the young man that's in your life that you're helping. And you got so many things going for you, but we need more men. We need fathers. We need husbands. We need men in general to stand up, to do harder things, and to set the example spiritually, but also physically as well.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because it's one thing to like I had strong men in my life. Like, my dad is my best friend, and he's somebody that, worked his tail off and did everything for us. But from, how it is when you're a kid, you like, if you tell your kid to go do something and then maybe one of your friends tells them, it's like, oh, look what, like, Joe told me, Dad. And you're like, yeah, I told you that 6 months ago. You're just a little bit more receptive to outside sources, especially as you grow up. And you said something really powerful there, and why I connected so deeply with your message and why we're sitting here today is it's like this concept of across the board, right? Like, we want to be on fire for the Lord first and foremost. Like, I'll just be honest. Like, I want to be in amazing physical shape, right? I want people to look at me as a leader in my career, in my business, when I coach them. I want to be a leader in my relationships, So it's like, it's one thing to be targeting one thing, and there's seasons in life for everything. A smart man told me that, Josh. It's one thing to be, on one of those levels, but I think it's our duty as men to, like, man, when you get that one, like, all right, well, what are we working towards now? Like, what's this other aspect, this other component in your life that you need to be striving for to continue to grow, to continue to expand the way we're supposed to?
So what's been some of the latest fruit in your life? I mean, I'm so fortunate that we got connected and that the Lord, has used me. And I say it with a lot of humility and, just some writing and with the books I release. But I know that you and I talk about a lot of different things the Lord's doing in your life. What's been some of the fruit in your life over the last year, and where are you looking to go next?
I think one of the coolest things that's happened over the last year is I've gotten to preach/speak to a men's group every Sunday. And it's usually like 30 to 35 guys. And it's my people. What do I say when it's my people? It's the dudes that are tatted up. It's the guys that, had rough upbringings. They're going to drop some F-bombs in there. God's put me in this position, Josh, to bring the light to them, to share my story with them and really be an example of what God can do for us, right? And it's just beautiful how God brings your people around when you start being open about your message. Because, my message is different than yours, Josh, which is why you mentoring me. And I was talking to the guys this weekend, I look at you as a spiritual mentor in my life, and you're such an integral part because, as you know, we've had a lot of talks. I do err towards the side of personal development. Everything is in my hands. I got this. If I work, I can achieve anything. And then when you and I have conversations, you really provide a fresh perspective on the spiritual side of things, which allows me, Josh, really to when I speak to these men, have a really good combination of both things. Because, dude, it would be real easy for me to just go in there and talk, go, all this stuff. And then our conversations and being in your mastermind and those things, it's all right, well, where can I find this biblically? Where are some examples, spiritually? Because I'm sure you remember that was the biggest thing I was lacking in my life. God had radically changed my life. But when we start sitting down talking scripture and those kind of things, it was a hole in my game. And it still is. I'm still working towards it. I'm still striving for these things. But that's probably been the most beautiful thing over the last year is getting to do that, getting to be a part of that. I've been doing it 8 months straight now. And I'm just we got 30 to 35 guys that show up every single Sunday. And it's amazing.
Awesome. What you're explaining there, and just for the audience too. So Trey, you're my people. We're different. And you are placed now in a sphere of influence where your testimony carries weight with where the Lord planted you right now. Preparation. He didn't want those things to happen to you, but they happened. And now he redeems them. He works all things together for good. And now that story, that test turns into a testimony that you can use to release, like you said, you're releasing the light to the men that you're serving, and you're creating that spiritual atmosphere and that spiritual hunger for them. And you're going to see fruit from that because you're planting seeds. And when I say you're my people, as men, as anyone listening to this right now, one of the core themes that I see in scripture and we talk about a lot is that you're created for greatness. You're created for excellence. So as you're talking about this, Trey, I want to run through a wall as I'm listening to your story of overcoming. This is what we're designed for. This is what we're wired for. And on the flip side, because we're driven and because we can be so driven to achieve greatness, it's easy to go off the road. I call it, ditch number 2, where we're in that orphan alpha syndrome. And we're just the rise and grind. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. I'll make it happen. Because here's the thing, you can make it happen. You can make it happen on your own, but you want to be in alignment with God's will for your life. So I just want to put some color on that for guys that are listening. But as driven men, we just got to be careful that we don't go off the rails. And now we're building something apart from God just because we're willing it with our personal sovereignty to bring it into his existence.
Josh, is it cool if I share a quick testimony about Kingdom Driven, your last book?
I'd be honored to hear it.
Well, this is really cool because this goes back to, I actually made an Instagram story in the moment this happened because I was literally had the enemy in my head telling me this. Literally, this was going on in my head in a moment. Trey, you haven't changed at all. You're running 100-mile races, and I also signed up for 3 200-mile races next year. It's nothing's ever enough. You're still the same old addict. You're chasing this thing. The business growth is never enough. The money's, and I opened your book that day. I had been struggling with those thoughts for 3 days. And I got your book in. I bought a bunch of copies for friends. And that concept of you are built for expansion. You're built to grow. And it was just dude, God just smacked me upside the head. You're okay, son. You're okay. You're striving to be your best self, right? You're choosing positive things in your life to grow and expand. But literally 2 to 3 days before that, Josh, I'm in my head beating myself up, right? Or the enemy's in my head beating myself because it's like, dude, nothing's ever enough for you. It's never going to be. And then I read it's like the first couple pages of that book. And I was like, thank you, God, for working through Josh, man, and like writing this book, because it was just another pivotal moment in my life. And we have so many of those, throughout our transformation, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's the dominion mandate. That's something that's imprinted in every man's DNA. And when you see like, wow, I'm meant to be multiplying. But here's the secret, Trey. You're already multiplying something in your life right now. If you're small thinking and you're limited thinking and you're being governed by limiting beliefs, like that's what's multiplying in your life. So you just chose to partner with, wow, his plan for me is to expand. It's to bear fruit in every area. It's to multiply everything I put my hand to. It's to subdue and conquer. And it's to keep replenishing and refilling myself in the journey. And, we say like the seed is within the fruit. So it has this ability to augment within itself. So that's a picture of man. Psalm 1 says that we are to be trees planted, trees of righteousness planted by the Lord, bearing fruit in our season. And there's going to be multiple seasons of life, like we talked about. And there's some seasons where there's preparation, there's obscurity, there's things we go through, there's testing, but it's all for the purpose of bringing forth fruit, which is a harvest, which is an inheritance to the Lord with what we do with our gifts, talents, and the callings that he's placed on us. So Trey, let's close this out with, we talked about Run with Christ, but I feel like there's a bigger vision behind it that maybe we didn't get to yet. So give me the vision and tell us what Run with Christ is and what is the vision the Lord's given you with this.
The Run with Christ started as, the 100 miler that we did. And what's really cool about that first 100 miler, I was going through a pretty tough time in my life. And Josh, you and I had spoke about this. And actually this office that I'm sitting in, I was actually living out of it for a couple weeks out from this 100-mile race, which is not ideal for performance, right? You have all these things going on in your life. I didn't have anybody to help me with this race. And I just want to highlight God here. I'm a couple weeks out. I have one friend who is a dear brother of mine to help me with this race. And you need a team for these. I had one guy reach out through Instagram. Hey, could I help you with this race to pace me? I was like, absolutely. Like the next day, another guy reached out. So I went from having nobody for this first 100 miler to a group of 3 brothers. And we shared collectively together with those 3. I did 50 miles with them. And the entire experience, Josh, we were running through the mountains, talking about what Jesus has done for our life. It was like this beautiful depiction as God just implanted these brothers for this specific race, these strong, faith-filled men, where literally most of the conversation was around our walks with faith. And that was like the initial Run with Christ mission, right? That race. Well, then after that, I'm like, man, where do we take this? Where does this really go? And from there, the actual Run with Christ mission was born. And what that is we're going to run a 100-mile race in every single state. Now that's Lord willing that my body can hold up to that. And I have to be very clear. I've done a couple podcasts on this. I just want to always remind myself that it's not about me running a 100-mile race. It's about, hey, when somebody asks me why I'm out there, it's like, look, man, Jesus literally took me from the point of suicide to now, like I'm about to do my 3rd 100-mile race right now. So it's to really glorify his name and what he's done for me and how powerful he truly is. Our goal is to go across the entire country and do a 100-mile race, which is a massive timeline. I've done 3. I'm about to do my 3rd one this year. And next year, I somehow signed up for 3 200-milers because 100's not enough, apparently. But that's the mission and that's the goal behind the project. And we'll see if the body can hold up. I don't know how long it's going to take, which is a beautiful part because somebody like myself, I need a big vision and purpose in my life. Because if not, Josh, I'll go back to that scared young kid that only felt comfortable on a field, right? And I think what's so beautiful about this project and mission as somebody who always identified as an athlete and why I'm always reminding myself, the Run with Christ mission has nothing to do with me running 100 miles. That's like the catch, right? Like, wow, this is insane. It's about glorifying his name. And I'm not identifying as an ultra runner or anything like that. And there's something else that's really cool about the ultra running space. As people could probably imagine, you're going out and running 100-mile races. Like, there might be something going on in your head you're trying to work through. I mean, in all seriousness, there's a lot of mental health in that sport, in that realm. And I have this mission to share with people. It's like, man, you can do this and enjoy it. Like, we can do this out of love for ourselves, out of like having a strong faith in our life. And I have some shirts made that say you're never running alone, meaning that no matter where you're at in life, no matter what's going on, Christ is always with you, because it's so easy. It doesn't matter how great your life is. Anybody that has amazing things going for them in life have experienced times of loneliness, and you just feel like, man, you feel empty inside. But if we can remind ourselves that, like, hey, I'm running with Christ through life. It's not just the ultra marathons. It's like when I get up every day, I'm running with Christ. And that's what the entire thing means, is like, through life, what would it look like if we ran with Christ? Like, in all the things that we did, in everything, in every avenue, in every relationship, in every conversation. And that's just to remind us to like let Christ shine through us. And it just turns out that we're going to tag some 100-mile races along with it and some 200-milers next year. So
I love the vision, man. I love the camaraderie. I love what you're doing with this. And, you know, Trey, I really respect the fact that you're like, hey, it's not all about me. I don't get any kind of personal ambition. Like, you're trying to build your name, but you really want to spread the message, and you're submitting yourself to the process. And again, it's like in total alignment with where we started this story, is that you wanted to be authentic and transparent with where you are. And you're doing that even now. Like, I love the fact that we could show up. There's no armor. There's no mask. There's no front of like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to do. It's like, hey, Lord willing, this is where I'm at right now. I'm following it. I'm going to keep obeying. And this is the vision I have that's pushing me forward. It's inspiring.
absolutely. And that, that's subject to change, whatever the path the Lord has me on, and I think it's really important.
Yeah. How many times do we get so fixed in our ways, like where we, vision boarded our life, or we have these strategic plans in place for, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And it's good to hold some of our things loosely and say, Lord, this is my plan. I'm submitting it to you. I'm asking you to order my steps. And you're also welcome to interrupt the plan, right? If there's something else, you can interrupt. I'll pivot. You speak, I'll respond.
That's my biggest goal with all of it, is that right there. Is like, because I've had a bunch of people ask me that, like, what if this happens? Like, that's I'm like, I don't know. It's like wherever the Lord leads me. That's my name, and my livelihood is not attached to running all those 100-mile races. It's, hey, how can I represent and honor what God has done for me in my life? And that could be, I don't know, I'm young, not even 30. That could be a lot of different things. So as of right now, that is the Run with Christ mission, though.
I love it, man. You're my brother. You're my friend. I love you. It's been an honor having you on. And you're also doing some incredible work with, you got a wall behind you of all these personal testimonies and pictures, before and after pictures. And you're in the online space now where you're helping people, even from a distance, get in shape. So for people that want to follow you and they want to connect with your story for inspiration, for encouragement, your content's incredible. Guys, Trey drops some amazing recipes. Right? Living healthy doesn't have to be like boring. It doesn't have to be just bland food. Follow him alone for the recipes. Cause like, I was like, I DM'd him, I'm like, dude, what is that you just made? Right. So I told him, I'm going to have you come in and teach the guys in our group. You're going to do some recipe swaps and share some of your secrets. But for people that want to follow for educational content, for inspiration, for what's happening with Run with Christ, or they want to connect with you because they're like, hey, I need a trainer. I need to get in shape. Like, how do I connect with you, Trey? How do I learn more? What's the best places for them to do that?
The best place is definitely Instagram. That's where I spend a lot of my time. But yes, Coach Trey TSC. Feel free to drop me a follow, shoot me a message. And, I'm really passionate about, I call it the kingdom body breakthrough, and meaning like, hey, these bodies belong to God. And I want to help people break through their fat loss and weight loss plateaus, and do that while growing closer with Christ. Like, that is what I'm passionate about. Helping people drop body fat, Christians, but do that without losing sight of the actual purpose of it, and not just to get a six pack or just to get down to the next pant size. That stuff is cool. But imagine how cool it is when you do that and your relationship with God strengthens tenfold while you do it.
Amazing vision. You're doing amazing work, and you're getting amazing results, not only in your life, but in the people that you're bringing through your transformation. We're going to drop your handle below. We'll make sure everyone's got the quick link to connect with you, to follow you. And Trey, I'll let you have the last word here, and then we'll close out.
I'm just grateful to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And I just want to remind everybody, if anything that I said spoke to you, if you're living a life behind closed doors that's not in the open, just know you're not alone. There's a lot of people that are living that life. And I truly believe, and I know in my heart, God places you in those positions for you to heal yourself and help others do the same. I truly know in my heart and soul, our purpose is to heal the things that ail us in life and then be able to go speak about it. And I'm just grateful for that. So remember, guys and girls, your greatest weakness is your greatest strength. And only you can face it and overcome it. But when you do, you're going to get to change so many lives. And there is no feeling like that that'll ever amount to anything.
Until the next episode, lead, fight, win. Hey guys, thanks for making it through this episode. What an incredible story that Trey brought to us, and so many principles that you can pull out and you can apply in your life right now. And my key takeaways are operating out of a new identity, being in the right environment, having support, community, and accountability while you can maintain authenticity and stay vulnerable in your process of growth and transformation. You heard Trey say that he's a member of the Standard 59 Mastermind. That is a place that I have been cultivating where we can have a community for men that need to enter it, that need that community, that want mentoring, that want coaching, and they all want it from a biblical kingdom perspective without the worldly stuff that sometimes just causes mixture. Another thing that came up is Trey talked about and gave a testimonial about the book Kingdom Driven. And if you haven't yet got this, you can get it on Amazon. You can get the hard copy, but I want to give it to you for free right now. So if you're listening and you have not yet picked up a copy of Kingdom Driven, my gift to you, go to kingdomdrivenbook.com and download your free digital copy, the entire book in its entirety, free, sent right to your inbox. Until the next episode, raise the standard.